I apologize for the slight delay in getting started here on the live stream. I know I said we would start right at 9 o'clock. We're 2 minutes past that start time, and I apologize for that. I was trying to make sense of the explanation given to Noah Hiles at the Post-Gazette from the ACC's head of officiating about what some of those calls were in today's game. And Noah tweeted his transcript of his interview with the head of officiating just a few minutes before we were about to get started. So I was like, I should probably familiarize myself with that to, have some context for what we're going to talk about here during the course of this post-game show. And then I have no sense of what he was talking about. The quote makes I think I understand, but the quote is really, or I shouldn't say really, but it's fairly obtuse. We'll get to that in a moment. There's a handful of things officiating-wise that we can talk about from this game. There's a handful of things offense-wise, defense-wise, and pretty much all elements that we can talk about here. And I'll apologize right off the bat. Excuse me. A little under the weather today. A little under the weather tonight. Kids brought home something from school, and that's always fun when that happens. I mean, if you have elementary school children in your house, you know how that goes. So, we're feeling that a little bit. We'll see how the whiskey goes down. I'm not sure it'll feel all that great, but we'll do our best to get through this hour and talk about the game. A 24-7 loss for Pitt to Florida State, number 4 team in the country, comes in and, I'll say it right off the bat. I'm probably going to repeat this a bunch of times, and you might have had the same feeling as well. I wasn't entirely blown away by Florida State. Now, they're playing without 2 NFL wide receivers in Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson. Those 2 guys have combined for like 60-some catches and 1,900-some yards and 11 touchdowns. I mean, they're awesome. They're going to be NFL players next year, and they didn't. Florida State didn't have them tonight. That changes the outlook of the game. And Jordan Travis still threw for like 360 yards anyway. So, you can only imagine what he might have done if he had those guys available. But on the whole, I mean, if that was the number 4 team in the country, I think they probably, I don't know, they've got some things to clean up, and I think they need to get a little bit better. But we'll talk about that. We'll talk about what Pitt did. We'll talk about what Florida State did. And we'll talk about what Pitt should have done. We'll talk about what Pitt could have done. We'll talk about how the officiating affected all of it, and we'll discuss it all right here on the Panther-Lair postgame on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Listen, as people file in, I know not everybody jumps in right away when we start, but as people file in, we will get, I'll ask you right off the bat, please like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That way you never miss any of our Pitt video content here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We have daily morning Pitt videos Monday through Friday. We have a weekly live show that we do every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. We have these post-game shows that we do right here. And if you want to make sure you don't miss any of it, click those buttons and you will be locked in. Maybe not for life, but for a long time, so you won't have to worry about missing any of the video content here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. The website, of course, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. It's a place to get all the coverage of Pitt sports, football, basketball, and recruiting. You find it all at Panther-Lair.com, and message boards interact with hundreds and thousands of other Pitt fans all day, every day. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. All right, we got all that out of the way. I think we can jump into a discussion of this game, and we'll get into the comments and the questions for sure. If you have something you want to say, you can go and put it in the chat screen over there. It's on what side of the screen? It's on the right-hand side of the screen. You can put your comments and questions in there. We'll read as many comments as we can and answer as many questions as we can. And in the meantime, if you want to make sure your comment gets read or your question gets answered, you can be a super chatter right down at the bottom of the screen. You can click the $sign, kick a couple bucks to the podcast, and give us some, support the podcast a little bit, and we will make sure we get to your comment and your question. I want to start off with a super chatter right off the bat. We got a few that have already jumped in. Michael B is one of our regulars, and we appreciate you, Michael. He says, "Hey, Chris, well, the team gave us all hope in the first half, and it was this close to being 14-0. Dumb penalties, no third down conversions, just killed us. Do you think just the OC will be fired, or will Pat Narduzzi clean house? Thanks." I mean, if you want to look ahead to the offseason, I expect there to be more than one change to the coaching staff. I think we all talked. Excuse me. I'm going to have to start drinking the beer just to keep the throat a little lubricated so I don't cough too much. I think we all talked in this past offseason about how they went through the whole offseason without making any changes to the coaching staff. Just the second time under Panther-Lair that he's had an offseason where everybody returned. I don't expect that to be the case next year. I don't expect everybody to return next year. And I expect there probably to be multiple changes in the offseason. Who that will be, I think we all can probably make our guesses and we can all make our predictions. And I imagine that most of our predictions will probably be right. It's not inside info or anything like that. That's just me saying that as I look at the situation, it sure feels like everything's headed in that direction. I think there will be changes. I think there'll be multiple changes. And there needs to be multiple changes. When you go through a season like this where you're 2-7, when you're losing games the way they're losing and you're losing for the reasons that they're losing them, you make changes. You don't stand pat with the group that's getting you there. And that goes for the players and that goes for the coaches. Now, there's probably less you can do in turning over the roster in terms of your contributors, although there are certainly things you can do there. And I shouldn't even say less. I mean, percentage-wise, there's probably less you can do, but you can definitely make some moves to the roster and the personnel and try to, bring in transfers, probably have some attrition that maybe you're looking for, some desired attrition and then some desired additions, but you can obviously make some changes to the coaching staff. And I think this team is desperately calling out for it. I think when you watch them play and you watch the outcomes of the games and you see how the games have gone and why they've gone the way they've gone, it's not hard. It's not difficult to figure out what the problem is. And it's not tough to circle the areas that have been struggling and letting the team down. And that's actually where I was going to start tonight. All right, and I wrote an article. If you go to Panther-Lair.com, it's right on the front page right now. I just wrote a quick piece that I threw together in the press box after the game. It's just another missed opportunity. I mean, how many games has this team wasted this year? How many opportunities has this team wasted this year? How many times have we sat down here for a post-game show? This is number 9 now. Number 9. And how many times have we sat here out of those 9 and said that this team wasted an opportunity? I mean, really, you could go through a lot. There's 7 losses, and we could go through just about almost all of them, not all of them. I'm not going to say they wasted an opportunity last weekend in South Bend. They got beat. They got beat bad in South Bend. They didn't waste an opportunity. They didn't have an opportunity to win that game. I'm not going to say they wasted an opportunity against North Carolina. They got beat bad in that game too. But Cincinnati has not won a game since they beat Pitt in week 2. They are now 2-7, just like Pitt. They've lost 7 games in a row. They haven't won a game since that game against Pitt. West Virginia, it looks like, I think the last time I looked, they were beating BYU, excuse me, rather soundly. Let me double check just before I declare this. I don't know if Panther-Lair.com, if we're declaring this one for, if we're calling this for West Virginia yet. Let me just check the score real quick. They were up. Yeah, they're still up. They're up 27-0 on BYU at halftime. Let's call that one. All right. And let's say, so they're now bowl eligible, but that was a game that you only gave up 17 points, right? I think you played, your defense played well enough to win in that game. That's probably a theme that will come back here. Blacksburg, Virginia Tech, you can say maybe they missed an opportunity there. Let's set that one aside just for a second. Wake Forest, you go down there and they have their 3rd string quarterback playing. You wasted an opportunity. And tonight might have been the most egregious wasted opportunity of them all. It really was. It really was. Florida State is the top scoring offense in the ACC. They came in here, and in the first half, you gave up 10 points to the top scoring offense in the ACC. And even though they ended up piling up 500 yards over the course of the game, they had almost 300 yards in the first half. You only gave up 10 points in the first half. And over the course of the whole game, you only gave up 3 touchdowns. And yes, I say only 3 touchdowns because against that offense, which is now, after tonight's game, averaging 39 points per game. So tonight's game dropped them under 40 per game, which is what they were averaging before tonight. So they're a potent offense. They're an explosive offense. They put up a lot of points. And you held them to 24. And more importantly, in the first half, you held them to 10. 10 points. You shut them out in the first quarter, but you only gained 19 yards of offense in the first quarter. You held them to 10 in the first half, but you could only score 1 touchdown. You wasted an opportunity to get on top of Florida State, to get ahead of Florida State, to build yourself a cushion so that when Florida State eventually broke through against your defense, which inevitably was going to happen, they're too good of an offense not to break through. You weren't going to hold them to 10 the whole game. I know coaches want perfection and they expect you to shut everybody out and all that stuff. You weren't going to do that. You weren't going to hold Florida State to 10 points the whole game. Not that they kept up on their yards pace. They had 297 yards in the first half. If they finished with 600 yards, they were going to get more than 10 points. They would get to the end zone again somehow. You weren't going to get another turnover and a turnover on downs inside the 10. And so they were going to get there. They were going to break through. But if you give yourself a cushion, if you score a few touchdowns, if you drive down the field and you're productive on offense, then you can absorb that. You can be competitive with that. You can even put the pressure on Florida State and maybe give yourself even a better chance to win. This was a missed opportunity. This Florida State looks just okay. I mean, they obviously have great athletes. Man, they have guys that when you get them in space, they take off. They're fast. I mean, it's a legitimately fast team, and you can see it on defense, but particularly on offense. I mean, those guys can move. But you had them without their top two wide receivers, and you were doing a great job keeping them out of the end zone. But you wasted it on offense. Again, you wasted it on offense. You scored 2 touchdowns against Wake Forest, and that's why you lost. You know, West Virginia, you didn't even score 1 touchdown, and that's why you lost. Tonight, you only score 1 touchdown. You're having success defensively. You're getting an opportunity, and you just can't capitalize. First drive of the game. Defense forces a fumble. Pitt gets the ball back at its own 46. This is perfect. This is the best way for this game to start. And they hand it to Sibo Flemister twice for no gain. I'm doing a shot over that. You gave the game away on your first offensive possession. I need to not yell tonight. Like my throat, my voice, been coughing a lot. I can't handle yelling. But you gave the game away on the first possession. First possession. You get a huge momentum swing. The fans are fired up. They're excited because you just got a turnover. Florida State was marching, and they get to your 46. You force a fumble and get the ball back, and you come out and hand it off twice. To Sibo Flemister, no less. And I like Sibo. But what have I been telling you? What have I been saying for the past couple weeks about Rodney Hammond? And I think we saw it tonight. Does anybody still disagree about that? About Rodney Hammond being the best back on the team? Because to me, it sure looked like it was clear. What'd they finish with? I'm supposed to be doing a shot, but what'd they finish with? Hammond had 13 carries for 60 yards, averaged 4.6 yards per carry. Flemister had 5 carries for 23 yards. He averaged 4.6. And that's pretty good. He had 16 yards on 1 carry. But, I mean, I don't think is there any question Rodney Hammond's the better option? But you come out on first down after the turnover, you hand it off, no gain. And then on second down, you go with 2 tight ends. And you hand it off, no gain. Third down pass is incomplete. You know, I don't... It feels like one of those age-old, like, football cliches. You know, you get those quick change situations, you get the turnover, quick change of possession. You try to strike. You know what I mean? You try to attack. And particularly from a good field position like that. The 46 is a good spot to be. You're almost at midfield. And instead they just lay up. Now, there were points in this game where I liked what they did offensively. There was maybe on the touchdown drive. Yeah, actually the touchdown drive. Their 1 touchdown drive. First down, they hand it off to Rodney Hammond. I like that, and they get 5 yards. And the next 2nd and 5, they hand it off to Hammond again, and he goes for 11. It's 11, first down after 11-yard gain. He's gotten 16 yards in the last 2 plays. They're at the Florida State 48. They've got 2 tight ends. They line up under center. And I said this to Jim Hammett and Jerry DePaul. These two guys, that's who I'm surrounded by. I mean, how lucky am I to be flanked by those two guys during the press box? And I said, guys, this is the spot. You're under center. You got two tight ends out there. You're going to get, you run play action. You're running the ball. You just ran the ball well on the last two plays. Play action and try to take a shot. And that's what they do. And they get it to Bub Means for 29 yards. And then they're at first and goal from the 9. And they throw the little pass to Bub Means, makes a great catch, and it's a touchdown. Like, I liked that sequence. Coming out after the fumble and running it twice, going run, pass. I mean, like, you're just feeding into the cliche about your offense of what people sort of assume your offense is. It doesn't always have to be run, pass. I'm getting in the weeds, right? I'm getting in the details. And the reality is they gave this game away on offense. Florida State was always going to break through offensively. Florida State was always going to get its points. Jordan Travis is really good. The other guys they have, those tight ends are good. The other receiver who stepped up with Wilson and Coleman out is good. They're good players. Trey Benson is good, and the other running backs are good. You knew those points were going to come. You had to capitalize. And they couldn't do it. And it's partially play calling, like I just talked about. It's partially playmaking, whether it's on the part of the quarterback or the offensive line blocking for him, or the receivers. Tight end lets a ball go through his hands, which is unfortunate. And then, on top of all of that, while you're wasting these opportunities, you get some tough beats from the officials. Before I get into the officiating, let's get some more comments and questions, some super chatters. RJCman38 is a super chatter, says, better effort, still dismayed by Narduzzi's atrocious game management. Not seeing what Nate could do in the second half was a bad call. So, Christian Veer in the first half, 9 of 22 for 181 and a touchdown. I mean, your guy threw for 180 yards in the first half. Right? I mean, I don't think, like, the thought of them changing quarterbacks never crossed my mind. And I'm not really sure why they would have done it. I mean, like, 9 of 22 is not a good percentage, but he averaged like 20 yards per completion. Remember when he was like 5 of 14 or 5 of something at one point? His first 5 completions gained like 150 yards. I mean, deep pass to Mumfield, pretty nice touchdown pass. Targeted Gavin Bartholomew. I mean, he did a lot of things I think you want to see. If you want to say that you're not sold on Christian Veer yet, I'm mostly in agreement. I'm mostly in agreement with you. I'm not entirely sure that I'm sold on him either. But his stat line, when he throws for 180 yards in the first half, it's hard for me to bench that guy. 180 yards and a touchdown, I'm probably going to leave him in. And quite frankly, should have had a second touchdown. Konate Mumfield should have had a touchdown. It should have. And all right, let's talk about that just for a second. Noah Hiles talked to the ACC supervisor of officials and asked him about that play. So, I mean, the play, Mumfield catches it. He's headed for the end zone. Guy gets him with 2 hands on the face mask from behind, and the ball gets knocked loose. I meant to go watch a replay of this to see if an official should have seen the face mask. Apparently, they didn't, but that's fine. The ball gets fumbled. It goes into the end zone. The Florida State player who recovered it was out of bounds. And that was really the question. Does he have to establish? Does he have to come back in bounds and establish his inbounds before he touches the ball? Here's what the ACC supervisor of officials said. Quote, "So I'll tell you the rule. The rule is whoever puts the ball in the end zone is responsible for the outcome until the ball is legally possessed again. So in this situation, the Florida State player clearly fumbles in the field of play." Now, he said Florida State player. He means Pitt player. So I'll reread that part with the right words. It says, quote, "So in this situation, the Pitt player clearly fumbles in the field of play," which is true. "The ball rolls into the end zone," which is true, "but is touched by a player that was out of bounds. Therefore, the responsible player for putting the ball in the end zone is the offense. The ball is now out of bounds. It's touchback." So, because the first time it was touched by a player who was out of bounds, that makes the ball out of bounds, which makes it like fumbling out of the back of the end zone or fumbling out of the side of the end zone. That's effectively what Konate Mumfield did, is he fumbled the ball out of the end zone. And that's the ruling. Florida State ball at the 20. And that stings. I mean, that hurts. That's a touchdown. That's 7 points taken off the board. Should have been an 82-yard touchdown catch. They actually gave him credit for an 82-yard reception. Even though, I mean, he fumbled at the 1, so I don't really know how he gets 82. But they gave him credit for an 82-yard reception, but he didn't get a touchdown because of that rule and the way that rule reads. Now, the other thing was the Gavin Bartholomew situation. All right? And this one, it's hard for me to comment too much on it because I wasn't standing there to hear what was said. But Christian Veyer certainly thinks nothing was said. If you recall this play, it's 3rd and 4. Pitt's at the Florida State 26. They had gotten the ball at the Florida State 46 after a punt. They drove 20 yards to the 26, 3rd and 4. Veyer scrambles and throws the ball away. Pitt has to, Pitt's going to come out and punt. While this is happening, I think it was Jared Verse, one of the Florida State players, was down on the Pitt sideline. While everything was happening on the Pitt sideline. So the official's standing there, and it appears, that Gavin Bartholomew's helmet is pointed toward the official, or the official seems to hear something from Gavin Bartholomew, and well after the play is over, throws a flag. Flags him for unsportsmanlike conduct. The ACC supervisor of officials says he has no comment on that. That was a judgment call. The player was fouled for or charged with unsportsmanlike conduct, and that's the end of it. Panarduzzi said he didn't really hear Gavin Bartholomew say anything. Christian Veyer said it was, quote, bull S. You can fit that in there. He says that Bartholomew didn't say anything at all. I mean, it's crap. I mean, like all these guys are saying that he didn't say anything. And how many times have you seen that? How many times have you seen minutes after a play ends, a player on the sideline getting flagged for unsportsmanlike conduct? Penalty pushes Pitt out of field goal range, so it costs them 3 points there. Puts the ball back to the 41. Pitt punts. Florida State takes over and drives for a touchdown. Effectively a 10-point swing. A game that was 10-7, could have been 10-10, turns into 17-7. If you put all of this together, if you put that 10-point swing with the Mumfield fumble, and 17 points, basically, I mean, this is a 17-point game. It ends up being 24-7. It ends up being a 17-point game. We've got these two specific instances that cost Pitt effectively 17 points. I don't get the call on the side. Now, does it matter when Florida, Pitt's next possession, they go 3 and out or 4 and out, I guess it was. If Florida State gets the ball back and they have a 30-yard pass and a 55-yard run on successive plays and score another touchdown, does it matter? No. But it's these kind of missed opportunities, it's these kind of wasted situations that cost Pitt this game. They very well could have knocked off the number 4 team in the country. They could have. I mean, the game was in reach. The game was there for them to have. And they failed to do it. They failed to do it for a wide variety of reasons, primarily the offense just, again, being unproductive, ineffective, and largely, I mean, I don't want to say any meaner words than that, but I mean, it's not doing anything. This offense is just not producing anything, and it cost them games last year, and it has cost them games this year. And now they're sitting at 2-7. Bowl eligibility is out the window. First time since 2017 they are not bowl eligible. And they missed an opportunity at a signature win for the season. Something to salvage the season a little bit. You're not going to salvage a season where you've already lost 6 games. You lose 6 out of your first 8 games. You're not going to salvage that. But you could get a little bit of respectability out of it. You get a little bit of hope for the future. Something positive to hang your hats on. But you wasted it because the offense can't do anything. And you have some bad penalties, some poor mistakes, some bad luck, and some questionable officiating. And that's how it goes on a season when you're 2-7. That tends to be how you end up being 2-7. Bill Florigen is a super chatter. He says that series with 4 minutes to go in the half was horrible. Penalties and bad play calling. They gave Florida State the ball back so they could get a field goal at halftime. Let's look at that drive for a second. Bill, since you bring it up. Let's see. 4 minutes to go. They had the ball with 4:10 to go. End up taking 2 minutes off the clock. They ran the ball. Oh, okay. I remember this. So they went the Wildcat on the first play of this drive. Yeah. I don't get, like, let's just say it straight out, okay? You don't need to run the Wildcat anymore. You don't. You don't need to run the Wildcat anymore. I'll add up the stats, and I would be willing to wager that the vast majority of Rodney Hammond's yards and a much higher yards per carry came on handoffs just out of a regular offense, as opposed to the 2-yard gain he got on the Wildcat here. You don't need to do it. No more Wildcat. So they get 2 yards on Wildcat, 2nd and 8 from the 27, because this is after Florida State's touchdown. They made it 7-7. 2nd and 8, Sebo Flemister false start. Okay, 2nd and 13. They throw deep. Incomplete. And that one, I think Bub Means seemed to let up a little bit. Didn't quite run under it. Seemed to slow up on his route a little bit. 3rd and 13. Real trouble, right? 9-yard pass, but they get a roughing the passer penalty. 1st and 10. All right, moving along now. Still with Sebo Flemister in, but they line up in the I formation, 1st and 10 at the Pitt 46. I know they're trying to run a 4-minute offense, but I formation? Really? Doesn't matter, though, because Branson Taylor gets called for holding. 1st and 20. Sebo Flemister gets a false start. Another false start. His 2nd false start on that drive. Flemister takes himself out of the game at that point. When he gets called, he immediately says, that's on me, and runs off the field. Rodney Hammond comes back in. Dejon Reynolds catches an 8-yard pass. Christian Bear throws an incomplete pass. I don't know who it was thrown to. Maybe Carter Johnson. Maybe Kanate Mumfield. And 3rd and 17, he throws to Dejon Reynolds. So you get 3 penalties. 4 minutes and 10 seconds to go in the half. You're tied at 7 with the number 4 team in the country. You get the ball. Where did they start on that drive? What did I say? You get the ball at your own 25. This is after a touchback. You get 3 penalties, 2 false starts and a holding. So that's 20 yards you lose there. And then you end the drive. 2nd and 17 from the 39, you throw again. And really, even 1st and 25 from the 31, you throw. You throw in all 3 of the final plays of the drive. 2 of those are incomplete. It stops the clock for Florida State. They end up only using 1 of their timeouts, but you could have maybe forced them to use a few timeouts, hand the ball off, lay up a little bit when you're getting pushed back, or call better plays or complete some passes. Florida State ends up, of course, driving down and kicking a field goal. Pitt makes a nice stop. Played some good defense after Florida State had a big 63-yard pass to get inside the 15, and they ultimately got inside the 10, but Pitt played pretty well and got a false start and pushed him back. I don't really know why you call timeout before the field goal. I don't think you need to ice the kicker. I know there's only 30 seconds left. You didn't expect to get a 20-yard run out of Daniel Carter. I didn't expect you to get a 20-yard run out of Daniel Carter. And then you end up using your last timeout to stop the clock there at 22 seconds as opposed to having one more timeout. And, of course, that wasn't even the most questionable timeout call of the game. That would have been, when that was the first Florida State touchdown, right? Yeah, the Jordan Travis touchdown run, 3rd and goal from the 1, and Pitt calls a defensive timeout. Fine, you want to get your defense in there. You want to get that, the big 5 defensive linemen, but then you're late subbing in. You screwed up coming out of a timeout. Florida State snaps the ball quickly and gets it in before you even really have your defense set. You lose a game. There's going to be mistakes you make all throughout the game. There's no, you're going to be able to look back and find this instance and that instance and find plenty of problems and issues that came up. But yeah, that 4-minute drive, they screwed that one up pretty good, Bill. I agree with you. Michael B had a second super chatter. Says, Chris, moment of truth. Yes, Narduzzi has a contract through 2030. If they finish 2-10 or 3-9, will Pat be back if it's the same thing in 2024? I don't know. You're going way far in the future. If they go 3-9 this year and 3-9 next year, will we be back in 25? I don't know. Look, you want my, okay, you said moment of truth. Here's my honest opinion, okay? Remember how they couldn't fire Jeff Capel last offseason? Remember how, I don't know if they wanted to or not, but the money just wasn't there to pay somebody to go away. And even if the money was there, you could raise real questions about whether that's a good use of that money to make somebody go away, to pay someone not to work for you. And I think if I think the situation would be the same with football. Like, you have the entire rest of the university, and they're looking at it and saying, you paid a guy how much money to not work for you? Really? Because that's not athletic department budget money. You know what I mean? The athletic department doesn't have $15 million sitting around to pay a guy to go away. So, I don't know. I mean, it's way far down the line. There are more important matters to attend to. You got to take care of Syracuse at Yankee Stadium this Saturday. You got Boston College. You got Duke. And then you got an all-important offseason. And this offseason grows in importance every day. Because let me tell you, you need to reorganize the coaching staff, fix it, and you're going to have to deal with a lot of roster issues. And some of that is going to be going and getting transfers to shore up some of the weaker positions you have, and maybe you don't have guys ready to step in or step up next year. And some of it's going to be retention. And before you say, well, how many guys do you really want to retain from a 2-7 team? There are good players on this team, quality players who are going to be attractive to other schools, quality players who are going to have opportunities to go elsewhere for good. I was the NIL, right? I mean, that's there's no reason to like beat around the bush with it. And there are schools that are going to find ways to get messages to players on Pitt's roster about entering the transfer portal and transferring for a chance to play somewhere else. And there'll be guys that Pitt doesn't mind seeing go, but there will be guys that they will want to hold on to, guys that you would want them to hold on to. You may be frustrated about a loss and maybe frustrated about another loss and frustrated about the fact that, they're 2-7. And you might say, all these guys stink. I don't want any of them back. But the reality is they're good players here that you don't want to lose. Now, that's not to say all 22 starters on offense and defense and all 22 backups are good players that you don't want to lose, but there's enough. There's enough good players that you don't want to lose that it's going to be a very challenging offseason. There are going to be some battles Pitt's going to have to fight just in terms of retention, let alone going and getting more transfers to join the guys that you hold on to. It's not going to be easy. And so this is a crucial offseason. It really is. I mean, as much as we want to talk about, and I think rightly so, that 2024 is a crucial season for Pat Narduzzi, setting the table for that year, that's going to happen right now in December. That's going to happen as soon as that Duke game ends. The efforts will turn exclusively to retention and addition. And they're not going to hold on to everybody. They're not going to hold on to even all the guys that they want to hold on to. They need to keep a majority of the guys they want to hold on to. But it's not going to be easy. And then they got to go get guys to fill out the group. And it's going to be really interesting to see if quarterback is one of those positions they pursue. And I think we could probably talk a long time about whether it should be or whether, whether Christian Bayer has proved himself or whether Nate Yarnell is the answer or whatever it is. But, the thing is, if you're going to do it, you've got to be ready to move quickly. In some respects, to some extent, that decision needs to already be made. You need to know right now that you're going to go after a quarterback. And I don't know which way they're leaning. I don't know what they're thinking. I don't know if Pat Narduzzi is yeah, of course we're going to get a quarterback. He said on Monday that he feels great about Christian Bayer and Nate Yarnell. I would expect him to say nothing different. I would not expect him to stand there on Monday in front of a press conference and say, no, Christian and Nate are not going to get it done. We need somebody else if we're going to start winning games again. He wouldn't say that. So he said what I would expect him to say. I just need to see what the actions actually are. Right? What do we always say? Follow the actions, not the words. Pay attention to what people do, not what they say. I mean, it'd be interesting to see what they do. All right. Some more super chatters in here. RJC Man 38 says, does anyone trust Narduzzi to pick another OC? We're done, Chris. Enough. Season ticket holders say enough. He goes. Well, look, I've been around this city for 26 years. I've seen a lot of threats of season ticket holder buyout or walkouts and boycotts and all those things. Remember all the walkouts that were going to happen at PNC Park? I mean, none of those things ever happened. And even if they did happen to some small scale, they never had any kind of impact. So I don't really see a season ticket holder revolt here. And the reality is, I mean, you're fans of Pitt, right? And this is always a unique thing about college sports is that a lot of the fans went to Pitt. You know what I mean? They had sort of a direct connection to it, more than you have with like the Steelers or the Penguins or the Pirates. You have a direct connection, but you went to the school. It actually is a part of you. Like, we always joke about fans who say we, you know what I mean? Like, oh, we just got to find out if Kenny's the right guy, or, you know, we can't run those kinds of plays with Kenny back there, or Najee or something like that. We always laugh about that, but the reality is with college teams, I mean, you really are part of it. You are part of the fabric, and so saying we kind of makes sense, I always felt. And so I don't think fans will ever truly leave, because it's you're rooting for the team and you want success, but it's part of who you are, is to be a fan of that school because you went to that school, because it's a part of your, like I say, it's a part of your fabric. It's part of your makeup. So, you know, boycotts and things like that. But to your other point, though, RJ Seaman 38, I think there is something relevant to discuss there. Because if Pat Narduzzi makes a change at offensive coordinator, right? There's like a lot of different questions that sort of stem from that, and I'm trying to think of the best way to ask it. Is there confidence in him getting it right? And that doesn't just reflect on his judgment in hiring, but it's also, you have to look at the situation of a guy who's now had how many coordinators? Chaney, Canada, Watson, Whipple, Cignetti. If he makes a change this offseason, it'll be offensive coordinator number 6 in 10 years. And so you would think good candidates, viable candidates, would probably look at it and say, do I want to go to this place where they've had 5 offensive coordinators in 9 seasons? What is that a red flag I need to keep an eye out for? And also go to this place where this head coach has a propensity for kind of talking down on his offensive coordinators after they leave. I'm sure he had some snide remarks about Jim Chaney. We all know what he said about Matt Canada and Mark Whipple. And, you know, he wasn't too rough on Sean Watson, but kind of backhanded comments. And I'm sure I'll have some, if he makes a move this offseason, I'm sure I'll have something to say about Frank Cignetti as well. And so if you're a coordinator candidate, excuse me, and you're looking at this position, you're saying, is this where I want to go? Now, it's a Power 5 job. If you're a guy coming up from a lower level or something like that, then, you know, maybe you don't look at those factors all that much. But you also might consider the fact that this is a guy in a program coming off a 2-10, 3-9, best case scenario 4-8 season. You know, I mean, I guess best case scenario would be 5-7. They win 3 games in a row. I mean, they would have to actually score points to do that. So I don't know if I'm all that confident in their ability to do so. And so if you're looking at this as a potential job, you're saying, well, what is the stability like long term there? What if we have another bad season? Is everybody going to be looking for work? Now, you and I can sit back and talk about, well, they didn't fire Jeff Capel. They wouldn't pay the buyout. And so it was really a non-starter as a topic. And we could say that applies to football as well. But is an offensive coordinator candidate going to know that or believe that? And so I think, you know, for a variety of reasons, the pool will probably be limited. I think Narduzzi has made some good coordinator hires. I think Matt Canada was a good fit for Pitt's offense that year. I don't know if he would have had that success in 2017, but I think he was a good fit for the offense in 2016. Jim Chaney's not a bad coordinator, I think. He ended up, I mean, he's still in the SEC, right? I think. But, I mean, he left to go to, where'd he go? Georgia? And then back to Tennessee, I think. I forget. But, I mean, he's fine. Their offense wasn't anything special that year, but Nate Peterman wasn't really all that special that year either. So, you know, one thing kind of leads to another. But, I mean, Sean Watson was obviously, I think, hired for, you know, loyalty and the thought that he would stick around and not try and bail, you know, kind of like Matt Canada did a year earlier. Mark Whipple was hired as a response to Sean Watson, you know, somebody who could develop a passing game and develop a quarterback, and after 3 years, he finally did it. Frank Cignetti was hired as a response to Mark Whipple, somebody who could get an offense, you know, install and develop an offense that could have some balance to it. They could run and pass effectively. And they haven't really been able to do either one very well when they didn't have an NFL running back on the roster. So, if Narduzzi makes a change, it'll be interesting to see what direction he wants to go. Like I said, it'll be interesting to see what the pool actually looks like because you're in a weird place right now. But they should be able to pay. They should be able to put up a pretty solid salary. It is a Power 5 job in a Power 5 conference. And depending on the retention, I think they've got some weapons they can use to potentially be attractive. But some of that will come down to the quarterback, I guess. Let's see if we have some other super chatters who came in. Focus Pooler 1 says, all the people calling for Narduzzi to be fired need to answer one question. Who in the world could we get to replace him? And that, so you'll get a lot of pushback on that, Focus Pooler. You'll get a lot of pushback from people who say that's a loser mentality and you shouldn't, decide whether or not you're going to make a move from a head coach based on, who you think you can get to replace him. I mean, you either should feel like you can do better or you can't. And I think to make that judgment, you have to kind of make a judgment on the entirety of the Narduzzi era. And has it been a net positive? Has it been a net negative? Has it elevated the program? Is Pitt's program in a better place right now than it was 9 years ago? And it's hard to say right now that it's in a better place than it was 9 years ago. Although 9 years ago, they were losing to Akron at home. They lost to Iowa. They had the debacle against Georgia Tech when they fumbled a ball out of the end zone. They had the debacle against Duke late. That team still ended up going to a bowl, but then they had the debacle in the Armed Forces Bowl. On the whole, I think the program's in better shape. I think the program is stronger. I think it's more stable. You can say what you want about, the value of those things, of program stability, program strength. But I think it's in better shape. So you look at okay, well, who's a coach you could hire who would take it to the next level? And, I think it's tough for an athletic director to make a decision on a current coach based on who they think they could hire. They got to believe, I think they would go into a situation, I think Heather, if she were ever to try and move on from Pat Narduzzi, would go into it knowing what her budget's going to be for a new head coach. If she believes that it's going to be competitive enough to lure someone who is, has seemingly a high potential for success, then you go for it. But, all in all, I don't know. I go back and forth on that whole thing of well, if you're going to fire him, who are you going to hire to replace him? Because we saw, what Dave Wanstead, I don't think it was the worst decision to move on from Dave Wanstead. But obviously everything that followed was supremely, messed up. So it is something to consider. I'm not sure if it resonates with passionate fans in the aftermath of a loss. Michael B says, did Kenny, as a super chatter, he says, did Kenny Johnson record a catch today? I can't even recall the ball thrown to him. You think he will be back next season along with Hammond and Bart? No, Kenny Johnson did not have a catch today. I don't even think Kenny Johnson had a target today. He's not credited as having a target. Malcolm Epps had a target. Dejon Reynolds had 3 targets. Bub Means had 7. Or no, those are catches. I'm sorry. Malcolm Epps had 2 targets. Gavin Bartholomew had 6, so at least they were trying to get the ball to him. Dejon Reynolds had 5 targets. I don't know. You said, do you think he'll be back next year? I think he's a good enough player that there are going to be teams trying to get him away from Pitt. I think Pitt needs to get the ball to him frequently. He played a lot. He was out there a lot. He was out on a lot of offensive snaps. He didn't get the ball thrown to him, but he played a lot. It's not like he was standing on the sideline the whole game. So I think that's good. But you got to get the ball to him. I think you got to get the ball to him. You got to get the ball to Gavin Bartholomew. You got to get the ball to Rodney Hammond. You got to be these are the guys I would prioritize. Not necessarily in this order. I think Bub Means has been playing really well. Bub Means, if you go back, the Virginia Tech game, obviously he had 1 catch for 75 yards and a touchdown, right? And that's a Really solid performance. So he had 1 for 75 there. He had 4 for 71 and a touchdown against Louisville. 9 for 109 and a touchdown against Wake Forest. 3 for 63 against Notre Dame. And then 7 for 98 and a touchdown today. So that's what? 1, 2, 3. No. 1, 2, 3, 4 touchdowns in the last 5 games. Right? I mean, he's got a 100-yard game in there, 70-yard game, a 60-yard game, a 98-yard game. I think Bub Means is playing really well. He's one of the guys I'm trying to target. He's one of the guys I'm trying to get the ball to. Not every snap, but a decent amount. He ended up with 11 targets. I'd probably go a little bit lower than that because I want to get Konate Mumfield some more targets. I want to get Kenny Johnson some targets. I want to get Gavin Bartholomew some targets, and I want to hand the ball and throw the ball to Rodney Hammond. How many guys is that? Means, Mumfield, Johnson, Bartholomew, Hammond. 5 guys. Those 5 guys are my priorities. And Dejon Reynolds made a great catch on the sideline. I think he's got usefulness. I think he could be like a Derek Kinder type of guy. And no disrespect to him because I have a lot of respect for Derek Kinder. But those 5 guys, Means, Mumfield, Johnson, Bartholomew, and Hammond, if it's me, they're getting 90% of the touches and targets over the last 3 games. Everything runs through them. The whole offense runs through them. And it's mostly there now, but it should be even more so. The run game runs through Rodney Hammond. Why is this difficult? Why is this hard to figure out? And I know Sebo Flemister was made a captain. He's been a great leader, and that's good. And look, if you've listened to these podcasts before, you've watched these videos, you know I support Sebo Flemister. I think he's got a chance to be really. I think he's a good back. But give the ball to Rodney Hammond. Throw the ball to Konate Mumfield. Throw the ball to Kenny Johnson. Throw the ball to Gavin Bartholomew. Throw the ball to Bub Beans. Those are my 5 guys. Those are my 5 that should be touching the ball 90% of the time to give you the best chance to win and to get those guys involved. Every one of them. Let's see, there's no more super chatters, so let's try and get quick comment here. The very last comment that came in is BGH Blitz says, "Yeah, what level did Narduzzi get the program to?" Well, he won an ACC championship and won the Coastal twice. You actually don't get to ignore those. They finished ranked 2 years in a row. You don't get to ignore that. They won 20 games over 2 seasons. You don't get to ignore that as well. Until we've got evidence to the contrary, this is one bad year. Right? In the aftermath of 2 good years. 2 good years, now 1 bad year. This 1 bad year doesn't erase the last 2 good years, in my view. Maybe you disagree. Maybe you've been waiting for the other shoe to drop. Pitt fans often are. Waiting for, there's got to be something bad that's going to happen that's going to invalidate anything good that has happened. Well, it doesn't invalidate it. They won 20 games over the last 2 years. They won the ACC 2 years ago. They won 9 games last year. They won 5 games in a row to finish 9-4. They finished ranked each of the last 2 seasons. This year doesn't invalidate that. It doesn't cancel it out. It doesn't mean that it didn't happen. So what level did he get the program to? He got the program to a top 25 level, a top 20 level. Our good friend Voodoo IPA says, yet another night I'm stuck at the oncology floor in Children's, and again, no victory lights in view for me. With daylight savings time ending, they would have been on for an extra hour. Hey, man, we salute you. You often chime in from the oncology floor at Children's, and that's rough. That's rough. All the best to you and yours. I wish you could see some victory lights tonight just to give you something there. Mark Shilaju says, what might have been if it weren't for 1 no call and 1 BS sideline call against Gavin Bartholomew. Not saying they would have won, but it certainly changes how the fourth quarter is played. And I mean, that's my thing with a lot of this. If you can be a little more effective on offense, if you can score a little bit in the first half, you not only create a cushion so that when Florida State finally breaks through on offense, you can absorb it, and it doesn't automatically mean doom for you. Because when they scored the second touchdown, that was it. I mean, really. And certainly when they scored the third touchdown, the second one in a row, you're like, well, that's it. Game over. And Panther-Lair conceded it as well with the punt later in the game with a few minutes ago. But if you score in the first half, if your offense is more effective, if you can actually play offense, you create a cushion. So when Florida State finally breaks through, you can still be in the game, and you put a little pressure on them. You change the way they're approaching the game. You change the way they're calling plays and the way they're going at it, in addition to giving yourself more opportunity. Homer Simpson says, Christian is just not a good quarterback. He doesn't make good decisions. So this is like these next 3 games, just like these last 4 games now, right, are all a proving ground for Christian Veer. That's what they are. And I don't know if he looks at it like that. I don't know if the coaches have told him they're looking at it like that. I don't know if the coaches are looking at it like that, but they should be. These next 3 games and this entirety of 7-game stretch, he needs to prove that he can be Pitt's quarterback of the future. Because if he's not, and if he can't prove that, then they need to hit the portal immediately on December 4th or December 5th, whenever the portal opens, and find the guy who can be that. And quite frankly, they need to be looking now. Guys aren't in the portal yet, but you hear things, you see things, you look around, you see who's playing, who's not playing, you see who might be an option that you can add. And you watch for them. Hey, we've heard this guy's going to go into the portal. All right, let's keep an eye on that. You need to have a list ready to go, so that if you get to December 5th and you're not convinced Christian is the guy, you can move and move fast. You don't really have a year to like, well, let's give him a full season and see what he can do. You don't have that kind of luxury. And to be honest, in college football these days, nobody has that kind of luxury. You know what I mean? Like this isn't just Panther-Lair's coming off a rough season, and he's not going to have that kind of luxury in 2024. Nobody has that kind of luxury to just give a guy a year and find out what he can do. Just take see what happens. I mean, Pitt has built in that luxury this year because they went 2-7, so they could just find out what they've got in their quarterback to end the season here. But nobody really has that luxury. You need to find your guy and win now. And Pitt needs to find their guy and win now. And if that guy's Christian, great. And I think there are things to like about Christian. I think there are things to like in how he throws the ball and how he's willing to take chances, about how he's willing to attack and be aggressive. With that comes some risks for sure. And it'll be a question for Panther-Lair of how risk averse he wants to be. You guys always say that he's too conservative. Sticking with the Christian Veer is not a conservative move. Excuse me. I like that he likes to attack. I like that Christian Veer wants to be a gunslinger, wants to fire, wants to let it rip. But he does need to make better decisions. He does need to improve his accuracy. I think he needs to get a little bit better with his athleticism and being able to run and move around a little bit. He needs to get more comfortable in the pocket and moving in the pocket. And we'll see. We'll see over the next 3 games whether he's the guy. Homer Simpson also says, as a city, we have to stop blaming these offensive coordinators. Christian sucks for Pitt and Kenny sucks for the Steelers. It's the sad truth. No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I'm pretty sure we're watching some bad offenses in this city. Jeffrey Novakoski says Narduzzi needs to step up and take control of this program. The penalties are out of hand. This falls on the head coach. I'm not saying fire Doozy. I'm saying that he needs to get better and fast. I don't know what to say about the penalties. After the Wake Forest game, I think they had the 13 penalties, and he basically came in the next Monday and I don't want to say justified all of them, but sort of excused almost all of them. I don't necessarily know if I thought that was the right approach. I don't know what his approach was behind the scenes, behind closed doors, if he was just sort of excusing them as well. But yeah, I mean, penalties are a problem. Some of them, I don't know about that unsportsmanlike conduct penalty on the sideline. Pass interference penalties, you're going to have that with this defense. It happens. False starts, what do you want to do? Like Sibo Flemister had multiple false starts in this game. This is a guy who's a sixth-year senior, a guy who was just recently voted to be a permanent captain by his teammates, a guy who, by all accounts, has stepped up in terms of leadership, and he has 2 false starts on the same drive. A crucial drive. A drive where they need to run out the clock so they can go to halftime either tied with Florida State 7-7 or leading Florida State. And he has 2 false starts on that drive. So I don't know if that's about Panther-Lair taking control of the program. I mean, I think, yes, ultimately it falls on a head coach, but the players need to take some accountability there too. The players need to take some ownership. And Sibo Flemister did after his second false start. He tapped himself out of the game. I mean, you need to see more of that. Tina Neal says, can we not take the 6-year seniors out and give some kids like Donald and Fitzsimmons some game time action, or do they just learn in real time next season? I don't know what to tell you about that one. I don't get it. I mean, Devin Daniels said David Green, Tyler Bentley, they've been good program representatives. They've done a nice job for this program for 6 years now. But to not get any snaps for Elliot Donald, not get any snaps for Sean Fitzsimmons, not get any snaps for Isaiah Neal. They're getting some of the young DNs out there. Sam Okunlola played a ton tonight, and I think that's a good step in the right direction. Jimmy Scott played a lot. I don't think I saw Nakai Johnson at all. But I think Jimmy Scott was out there more than probably we've seen him in a long time. And, Sam Okunlola was definitely a mainstay on this defense. He played on almost every third down Delta package, that defensive sub package they use. He was out there. So they were going with some of the youth at defensive end, but I don't know why a defensive tackle. I mean, those guys just don't make plays. Find somebody who can make plays. And find out now if you have guys who can make plays. Get Donald out there. Get Fitzsimmons out there. Get Neal out there. Get some of these younger defensive tackles and give them a chance to make plays, to show if they can make plays. Mason Taylor didn't make a play. I got LSU Alabama on the TV screen over here. And Mason Taylor, Jason Taylor's son, who looked at Pitt, took an official visit, just dropped a very easy pass. Let's scroll down through more comments and questions. I'll just read through a few of these. Royce Beacom says I think he's talking about Panther-Lair, has openly stated the last 2 losses were on him. Is it up to him to fix it? But when? It is up to him to fix it, but when? I hope he has told the kids that regardless of their talent level, it's his responsibility to get them ready. I mean, it is. I don't think there's any question about it. I do think every coach deep down believes that if the players would just do what they're told to do and coached to do, they would win every game. But ultimately, I think there's a deeper truth to that if the players aren't doing what they're told to do and coached to do, then they're not being told and coached in the right way. And that can mean a lot of things, but it ultimately comes back to the coaching. David Allen says the player talent level is not that strong. Coaches are bad as well, but the talent is clearly not there. I think there is some... I think there are some talent deficiencies on this team. I think there's some areas where either they haven't recruited well enough or where players who are inexperienced are playing a lot and getting a lot of playing time and showing signs of their inexperience. It's a transition year personnel-wise. That doesn't mean you need to go 2-7. You know what I mean? You don't need to be 2-7 just because you're turning over. There's turnover every year in college sports, and you might have a little bit more than usual. And certainly on defense, they're replacing 6 starters. On offense, they've had to basically turn over the entire offensive line due to injuries. That'll happen sometimes, and you'll struggle, but you don't have to go 2-7. It doesn't have to be that bad. Mark Shilaju says Rodney Hammond is the better of the two backs, tougher runner between the tackles. It's a head scratcher that a team that can't score doesn't run the ball more to shorten the game. Comments. I mean, it's funny because like a lot of people would say they run the ball too much, that it's an antiquated, old, Stone Age offense that runs the ball too much, even though they came into this game, and they're probably still there, at the bottom of the ACC in rushing attempts. Dead last in the ACC in rushing attempts. So they don't run it nearly as much as people think, although they're also like last or next to last in total offensive plays. They just don't run a lot of offensive plays because they're losing time of possession every game, and they end up not really getting the ball all that much. So do they need to run it more? Yes and no. Because as the passing game has been so ineffective, teams have just loaded up to stop the run because they're not worried about the passing game. I think Pitt's going to have a consistent game or two of throwing the ball effectively before they're going to loosen up defenses against the pass. Or against the run, excuse me. Like, they're not going to find a lot of running room if they're not a threat through the air. Let's see. Scrolling down, seeing here from trying to find some people who haven't commented yet, or Will says this offensive ineptitude wouldn't be so frustrating if not for the fact that we have weapons at every skill position. What are the chances more than half of the offensive staff is replaced? So there's Frank Signetti, Dave Borbley, Andre Powell, Tim Salem, Tyquan Underwood, right? That's 5 guys. Are they going to replace more than half? I think that's possible. What are the chances? Better than 50%, I would say. Benjamin Glazer says, Chris, I'm pretty bullish on this defense for next year. Also, good to see Nate Temple get his first sack. I agree. Nate, we talked to Nate this week. He hasn't been very productive in his career. Still getting a lot of playing time, but he did get a sack on that weird double flea flicker that Florida State tried to run, even though they were up by like 17 late in the game. I don't really know why they were trying to run that, but now it's on tape, I guess. So opponents have to prepare for it. Pitt didn't have to prepare for it, and they still managed to get a sack out of it. Let's scroll through here. Let's see. Trying to find anybody who hasn't really said much. So Jeff and So Clean, I just like your name. So you say, he says, every time Pitt calls a defensive timeout in the red zone, they give up a touchdown, I swear. You might be right. I don't know about the numbers on that, but you might be right. Byron Flex says Mike Norvell turned a struggling program into a national championship contender through the portal, 26 players over 2 years. Pitt needs 25 players from the portal this year. Do you agree? I don't agree. I don't think they need 25, but they need like 5 to 10 really good ones. They need 5 to 10 guys at some key positions. You know what I mean? If that's offensive line, if that's quarterback, if that's... I'm of the mind that they don't need a wide receiver. I don't know if everybody agrees with that. I would put wide receiver lower on the priority list. I think an edge rusher, a defensive end is probably pretty high on the list. Maybe a cornerback. So, I mean, like 5, 7, 10, somewhere around there, not 25. I don't think they necessarily need 25, but I see where you're going. David Allen says, I think that Panther-Lair is struggling with the idea that the program is really bad and that there's no point sticking with Narduzzi if he doesn't have a decent year next year. Well, yeah, I mean, like, David, your if statement in there, that's something I'm not struggling with. All right? It kind of speaks to the whole thing. I mean, you talk about the program is really bad. Well, I don't know if the program is really bad. I know they're having a really bad season. You're not going to get any disagreement from me about that. They are having a really bad season. There's no question. I agree about that. I'm not automatically assuming that this really bad season is the direction of the program. I think it's possible to have a bad season and rebound and play better the next year. I mean, they had a bad season in 2017, right? That was a bad year, and they rebounded. They won the Coastal the following season. You can have a bad year. It's about how you bounce back and how you rebound, and I'm not struggling with that idea. I just need to see what's going to happen. I think there's enough talent on this team, and I think there's enough that you can do through the portal to rebuild that you can move forward and get positive results and get improvement and get something of a bounce back, the next year. I just need to see what that's going to be. For now, to me, this is one bad year. For now, to me, this is a bad season, not necessarily a bad program. All right. Here, we'll leave it on this. Scott Traverso says, the program isn't bad, but to keep it at the level where it's expected to be, seasons like this can't happen. I largely agree. You know what I mean? I largely agree. You really should never dip below 6-6. 6-6 should be that bad season. 6-6 should be that bottoming out. A season like this, where at best you're going 5-7, and the wins will probably be in that 3-win range, maybe 4 if you can get a few good bounces. I mean, seasons like this can't happen. You're absolutely right. And so we'll see if it happens 2 years in a row. Then yeah, there'll be some really hard conversations that have to be had for sure. For now, I'm willing to at least consider the possibility that this is a blip on the radar. This is a bad season, not necessarily a bad program. But I think when we look back, when you start looking at the reasons why this season happened and why it happened the way it did, it really comes back to the offense. But we said back to the spring and over the summer, this was going to be a young defense. This was going to be a defense that was rebuilding, a lot of young, inexperienced players, and they were going to take their lumps along the way. The offense needed to score enough to make up for it. And they haven't. Not once. Not once has there been a game out of their 2 wins where you would look at it and say, or actually, you know what? Shoot, out of all 9 games, how many games would you look at and say the offense played well enough to win? Maybe the Louisville game, but even that, the defense pitched a shutout in the second half. There hasn't been one game the offense was the reason they won or played well enough to win in a loss. All right, Pitt loses 24-7. I think we can hang it up for the night. We made it through a solid hour. I appreciate everybody who commented and I appreciate everybody who commented, the super chatters, and everybody who put the comments and questions in there. It's always good to sit down and chat about these things after the fact. Like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That way you don't miss any of our YouTube content here or any of our Pitt video content here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And then, of course, head over to the website, Panther-Lair.com. We'll have a lot of content there and coverage from the game. And, we'll get you ready for Syracuse next week with all the Pitt football, basketball, and recruiting coverage. Oh, and Pitt basketball. Got a Pitt basketball game on Monday night. So there's that to look forward to as well. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com is the website. Go check that out. And, of course, our YouTube channel here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Thanks for watching this post-game show. It's can't say it's fun to watch the game like that. But, well, at least we get to get together and hang out and talk about it. So thanks again. Appreciate it. Have a good night, good rest of the weekend. We'll talk to you on Monday with the Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.